Welcome back, everyone, to the cigar smoke filled back room. I am Doug with Tusk Consulting, tuskconsulting at gmail.com, tuskconsulting at gmail.com. If you're a pro gun Republican and you need political consulting help, drop me a line at that email address. We'll work something out. If you are not a pro gun Republican, get out of here. Throwing you off. In the ongoing video series about things that are not discussed in politics, or at least not discussed honestly enough, today we're going to talk about government intrusion into industry. And specifically in this case, we're going to talk about the automotive industry and the CAFE standards and how that affects the automotive industry. Before we get too far into the program, though, the cigar of the day is a Romeo y Julieta, and the beverage of the day is we're made some gin cocktails because it was like 50 degrees today, and after the winter we've had, 50 degrees feels like summertime. So gin cocktails are very much a summertime drink, in my opinion. Is the Hendrix Grand Cabaret. Some oddball, but hey, tastes good. Anyhow, man, the cocktail is right on the label, so easy to make. Let's start with the automotive industry. Um, this is a perfectly good example of government meddling in an industry, and I picked the automotive industry specifically because it is very, very visible for a couple reasons. Americans love their freedom, and rightly so, and the freedom to drive wherever you wish, to move about freely, is something that we Americans cherish very much. And the personal automobile is the epitome of that. The liberals hate that. They want their 15-minute cities and for everybody to, sit there and dutifully, eat their cricket paste or whatever insane liberal dream it comes next. We Americans don't want to do that. We want to go where we want to go when we want to go there and not have to ask anybody permission. And the personal automobile is a symbol of that freedom. Secondly, the automotive industry, because of the UAW, is a big deal amongst labor unions. And this historically is something that has supported the left, but now is changing sides and is coming our way. We really like that. Um, so both, there's a couple angles here that make the automotive industry highly, highly visible. So the big way, look, there's a lot of ways that government intrusion hits the automotive industry. The way I want to talk about today specifically is about the CAFE standards, or the corporate average fuel economy, CAFE standards. So the idea behind the CAFE standard came into effect like back in the 70s or whatever. The idea was this was, a social engineering idea. We're going to convince Americans to drive more fuel efficient vehicles by essentially punishing the car manufacturers if Americans don't. If this starts to sound a little wonky to you, don't worry, it gets worse. And before we get too much further, I want to acknowledge a brilliant radio host, Jim Quinn. And Jim Quinn's first law is that liberalism always generates the exact opposite of its stated intent. So you can tell where we're going with this. It's not going to be as successful as the social engineers and liberal busybodies anticipated it being. So let's start with some very valid criticisms of the CAFE standards. First off, it is a hidden tax. Politicians love hidden taxes because nobody complains about them. A direct tax is like, say, a tax on gasoline. So if you went to a bunch of economists and you said, hey, check it out, we need to incentivize people to burn less gasoline, whether it's driving more fuel efficient vehicles or combining multiple trips into one trip or carpooling, whatever. We need people to burn less gasoline, period. End of conversation. Economists, who are numbers people first, right? To get the numbers going, would say, well, that's easy. Tax gasoline. Gasoline becomes more expensive. People will therefore be constrained in what they can spend on it. And poof, they will modify their behavior, both in the short term, carpooling or whatever, and in the long term, next time they shop for a car, they're going to shop for a more fuel efficient car. Great. Politicians hate that though. I hate it because it says right on the pump, or at least here in my home state of Ohio, it says right on the pump how many cents per gallon for the federal tax, how many cents per gallon for the state tax. And if you are the politician that votes for an increase in the gas tax, people are going to be upset with you, and rightly so. So politicians hate a direct tax. They hate it. Much better to tax a corporation for not shoving enough of the right product in the politicians' minds down the throats of Americans. And if they fail to shove the correct mix of vehicles down your throat, then they get fined. Okay? You may say, well, good, stick it to those evil corporations. But I would allow you just a moment to reconsider that. Corporations do not have vaults full of money that they backstroke through like Scrooge McDuck. No, 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 no. You know where Ford or GM or Stellantis or Toyota gets its money from? Hmm? From you. When government taxes a corporation or fines a corporation, they have to get that money from you. And they're going to get it. Oh, they will. In the form of increased costs for their automobiles and so forth that you will eventually pay. So effectively, what they've done is they've forced corporations to be the bad guy, to be the tax collecting agency. The money's still coming out of your pocket because that's the only place it really is. Anyhow, so it's a hidden tax, not a direct tax, because the gutless politicians don't want to be honest about their liberal social engineering scam. Instead, they hide it. That's the first criticism. Second criticism is that the foreign automakers aren't hurt much by the CAFE standards if they're hurt at all. And there's a number of reasons for this. The most obvious is that a lot of foreign automakers either just don't care because they're a luxury premium brand, and quite frankly, the amount of the fine is almost irrelevant to how much their vehicles cost anyway, so they don't care. Or they're like Toyota or Honda that sells very efficient vehicles, imports very efficient vehicles to the US market, and already meets CAFE standards anyway. So what do they? So who gets hurt? Oh yeah, the traditional big three. You know, the people that employed millions of Americans once upon a time in good manufacturing jobs. Yeah, that's who gets hurt by the CAFE standards. You really believe that the left still cares about the working man? They don't, and they never did. By the way, they just hid it a little bit better in years past. And because some of these foreign automakers already comply with the CAFE standards because they selectively import only the things that are very efficient, it has also given them opportunity because if the CAFE standard is here and they're here, they're more efficient than they need to be. That delta gives them room in which to have their average fuel economy go down. What does that mean? Where do you think the Lexus idea came from? Oh, yeah. Toyota, Toyota said, hey, check this out. We have such an efficient fleet of vehicles in the USA. We're so far above the CAFE standards, we can afford to sell some less efficient vehicles that are heavier, that are more luxurious, and we can poach market from Lincoln and Cadillac and premium domestic brands like this that the domestic automakers can't sell more of those because they're not hitting the CAFE standards. So we can selectively poach into those markets and snag market share. So the foreign automakers love CAFE standards, but the people here are getting killed by it. So there's a problem. Additionally, again, the whole idea was CAFE standards will gently nudge Americans into more fuel efficient vehicles. You think, well, smaller vehicles, right? Ah, but hold on. The CAFE standard has various formulae in it. And included in that formula is something called footprint. And the footprint is essentially the area bounded by the four tires of the vehicle. So, wheelbase times track. So, length times width, if you will. The bigger that number is, the less efficient the vehicle is permitted to be. So, can automakers make things more efficient? Yes, they can. But it's easier and cheaper sometimes to simply make the vehicle, SUV, truck, whatever, simply larger with the current technology so that it fits in a different place on the curve and it's a bigger footprint vehicle, so it's permitted to be less efficient, and bam, they comply that way. So if you ever sat around and wondered why it is that pickup trucks and SUVs today are bigger than they were 20 or 30 years ago, that's why. Because literally the government is forcing automakers to make bigger SUVs and bigger trucks in order to at least not get hit as hard by the CAFE standards. Now this has like this is literally the opposite of what the liberal social engineers in the 70s envisioned, right? They envisioned people driving, very small, very highly fuel efficient vehicles. Instead, their liberal dream is forcing F-150s to get larger and larger every year, and Dodge Rams to get larger and larger every year, and it being almost impossible to find a very small truck. And the Ford Maverick just came out a couple of years ago. It was the first compact pickup truck made by a big three automaker in decades. Great, great truck, very, very popular. But there's not a lot of those running around. The big trucks, there's tons of them because they grew the footprint to comply. Now, this has other implications, like safety, for instance. If you got a lot of big trucks and big SUVs on the road, and you're one of the people driving a small fuel efficient vehicle, guess what happens in a wreck? Yeah, person in the truck or the SUV probably fine. Person in the small fuel efficient vehicle, not going to do so well. That's a problem. Oh, additionally, in order to meet the A in CAFE is average. So in order for an automaker to meet the average, some of their models are going to be less efficient than the standard. Some are going to be more efficient than the standard. So what this means is they have to sell some losers in order to make up for their winners. And this is where there's a fundamental question the liberal social engineers never asked. What do customers want? They never asked because they don't care. Because they think customers are stupid. They think the people are stupid. They think it's stupid that there even has to be elections. Obviously, they're smarter than everyone else. Just ask them. They'll be happy to tell you. Okay? They never ask what customers want because they don't care. Because they think they get to tell you what you should want. If you disagree with them, you're a moron. It's this elitist attitude that is just maddening. So, in order for Ford or Chevy to sell their big, relatively inefficient vehicles in the number that customers demand, because that's what they want, they have to sell some of their smaller, highly efficient vehicles sometimes at a loss, because that's what it takes to get the price point down to where it will be attractive enough to the public that, yeah, okay, I'll buy one of those now, right? Because it's A in cafe is for average. And where is this all eventually getting us to? Well, comes around to the electric vehicle mandate and incentives. Now, look, let's acknowledge something right up front. Electric vehicles are generally more expensive and heavier than their internal combustion engine equivalent vehicles. To be clear, I have nothing against electric vehicles. I don't own one. I might someday. But look, here's the deal. If an electric vehicle fits your mission and you want one, I'm a liberty guy. I believe in freedom of choice. Your call. Buy an electric vehicle if you want. The incentives and the mandates I have huge problems with, and we'll get to that in a minute. But generally speaking, if you have a mission that an electric vehicle meets and it's something you want to buy, more power to you. Free country, do what you want. I don't like being told I gotta, and I don't like being taxed in order to pay for other people to do it. But you want it, good on you. Now the problem with the mandates and the incentives, especially the incentives, look, it's a federal government program, which means it's not going to function well and it's going to be confusing because that's what the federal government does and that's what it is. The confusion with the incentives comes in a couple ways. First off, Not all electric vehicles qualify for the, was it $7,500 for a new vehicle incentive? Not all makes and models qualify. If it was just, hey, all electric vehicles, 7,500 bucks off, boom, new vehicle sale, poof, that's it. That would be simple. The federal government can't do that. Heck no. No, 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 no. They got to make it complicated, right? There's all kinds of rules based on where the battery gets made and what the MSRP value is or was, and it gets very confusing. And it's not just makes and models. Like it would be one thing if you said, okay, 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 check it out. All the Tesla Model 3s qualify, but the Tesla Model S's don't, right? Or the Tesla Model Ys do, but the Tesla Model X doesn't. Like it's a little more complicated, but I guess I could wrap my head around. Okay, it's making models for all right, fine. No, 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 no. Because trim levels can price you out. So, or going from a standard range battery to an extended range battery could change where the battery's made, and now poof, you're not. So, take the F-150 Lightning. It is possible that most of the trim levels of the Lightning could qualify, but the Platinum level obviously does not because its MSRP value is above the, I think, $80,000 cap. Okay, we're going to talk about pricing here in a minute, but so even within the same make and model, there are trim levels that will be poof out. That's very confusing, and it's hard on the customer that doesn't know. So that's a problem. And of course, the biggie, what the electric vehicle mandate or incentive does is it's a wealth transfer program. It is taking money away from people who are being taxed, taxpayers, and giving it to people who are purchasing electric vehicles. And I have a problem with this. I'll tell you why I got a problem with this. Again, these liberal social engineers who claim to be the party of the average guy, right? And not for the rich. Who's buying electric vehicles? Oh, yeah, people with above average wealth and above average income. Who's paying the taxes to subsidize them? The people that can't afford electric vehicles. So you're literally taking money out of people's pockets that can't afford an electric vehicle and putting it into the pockets of the wealthy people who are buying electric vehicles. It is the epitome of a regressive tax. It's insanity. But we're talking about liberals, so I repeat myself. At the end of the day, from the OEM standpoint, an electric vehicle program is a dandy way to up their average to comply with CAFE standards. And in fact, some of them don't, they have electric vehicles in the lineup, but they don't make them. They have other people make them, and then they just slap their brand label on it. It's a compliance card for them. They do it because it'll help them with the A in average. That's it. They don't care about electric vehicles. They don't want to care about electric vehicles. They just want to comply so they don't get fined to death by the government. Now, aside from electric vehicles, just vehicles in general lately, notice the huge uptick in price? And look, everything's got more expensive, Biden inflation, whatever. All right, fine. But vehicles, new vehicles, have been going up in price much faster than everything else on average. And there's a bunch of reasons for this. One is the OEMs have to recover the money they invested for the technology. Okay, well, more efficient engine. The computer's got to be able to do this and that, and battery technology, and so okay, that costs money, right? There's non-recurring engineering going on there, and they have to recover that cost. Okay. Two, the bigger footprint we talked about. Remember, if you just make it bigger, it's easier to comply, which again makes no sense. But hey, who asked the government to make sense? So as the vehicles get bigger, there's more materials involved. They weigh more, especially electric vehicles weigh more, and boom, cost more. And then of course there's the fines because again, the company ain't going to pay the fine without getting the money from you. Okay, so that is going to result in the cost of the vehicle going up. Now, you may say, well, Doug, I don't care. I'm going to save money in gas. That's true, you might. But if you've got an old beater that's a gas guzzler that, let's say you sell it for $5,000, and then you go buy a $30,000 brand new vehicle that's more fuel efficient. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm saving money every time I fill up. Yeah, it's true. But you sold this for 5K, you bought this for 30K. You spent net $25,000 out of your pocket. All right, $25,000. How many gallons of gas is that going to buy? $25,000 could buy a lot of gasoline, a lot. Even in a horribly liberal state like California, where gas is close to $5 a gallon, That's 5,000 gallons of gas. And at 30 miles per gallon, that's 150,000 miles you have to drive before you get the return on investment from going to that new, more fuel efficient vehicle. So just doing it because you're going to get an ROI, a return on investment from the fuel efficiency, that ain't it. Okay. In summary, a whole bunch of social engineering was wrapped up in this law regulation with the cafe standards. It forced the OEMs to build stuff that they didn't want to build for customers that didn't want to buy it and that neither of them could afford. And that is just a classic example of government intrusion in the market, government intrusion in industry, and as usual, it sucks. Again, I am Doug with Tusk Consulting, tuskconsulting at gmail.com, tuskconsulting at gmail.com. Thanks, everybody. See you next one.